Pete Rose, rigged lotteries, and the NFL is bulletproof. It's all next on a new episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Yeah, off and running on episode 7. I think it's episode 7 of Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome in. We got lots to get into on this episode. Before we do little business, I have to remind you, please hit that subscribe button if you've not already done that. Whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, hit a button or two, like the episode, leave a review. Any little bit helps. I appreciate you. Yes, I'm looking right at you. All right, let's get into it. So we got Pete Rose back in the news. The NFL schedules are out. The NBA draft lottery was held. We were off by one single ping pong ball, a single number, and it would have been Portland. Instead, it's Dallas. And really, you'd have to say one of the most impactful nights that the NBA has had in quite some time with that draft lottery, the Knicks game that night, and the Tatum injury. And we'll get into the Knicks flop in game number 5, too. First off, we've spent a ton of time on the Knicks playoff run, and we have game 6 coming up tonight. I'm not going to run down all the things that the Knicks did wrong in game 5, but the fact that there's a long list of all the things they did wrong in game 5 is why I'm confident they are still going to win the series. Pretty simple. They still lead the series 3-2. That's a pretty good one. Jason Tatum is not going to be back out there, obviously, with the injury. And number 2, the Celtics have one way to beat the Knicks, and they have one way to beat opponents, and it's having everything go right. So in game 5, they hit 22 3-pointers. In game 3, they hit a bunch of 3-pointers as well. The Knicks in game 5 were brutal in the third quarter. Everything went the Celtics' way after halftime. And when you have games like that, like in game 3, you have to lean into the fact that the previous game has no bearing on the next one. So when you're losing, as a fan, if everything is going against your team in an NBA playoff game, for me, it actually makes me feel better about the rest of the series because I know the next game is not going to be like the previous game. It's going to be different. And I know the common feeling about game 3 was, whoa, the Celtics are back in the series now. And that didn't last. It was just one game where everything went right for Boston. It had zero bearing on game 4. And the same goes for game 5 as opposed to game 6. And game 5 has no bearing at all on game 6. The Celtics have one mode of attack. And look, when it works, it's great. You hit a bunch of threes. If the talent is close, clearly the talent between the Knicks and Celtics is close now. One team hits a ton of threes. It's hard to keep up unless you're hitting them at the same rate or even better. And the Celtics have done that in 2 games. And the Celtics have not been able to do that in back-to-back games. So to think that they're going to be able to do it in 3 in a row, which is what they'd have to do to win the series, I am skeptical they'll be able to do that. So good for the Celtics on game 5. I guess you see that sometimes a team responds in the immediate aftermath after losing a top player. But we know it's tough to keep that up. The adrenaline wears off. And the Celtics have shown zero ability in this series to adapt if things are not going according to plan. If they're not hitting threes, they're sunk. Their plan B is to shoot more threes, which shockingly has not been an effective strategy. So heading into game 6, Knicks fans, I'm pretty sure Derek White is not going to hit 7 threes again. I'm pretty sure Luke Cornett is not going to look like Hakeem Olajuwon again. And I'm pretty sure the Knicks are going to punch their ticket to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years. And finally, the third point would be, I saw a lot of, game 5 shows you how dangerous the heart of a champion is and how the Knicks are going to have to prove themselves and dig deep. The officiating had a major impact on that game. I mean, we'll get into the draft lottery a little bit later, and the general reaction is that it was rigged, fixed, basically. But we see this every single year. I'm not saying that the games are scripted. I'm not saying that the outcomes are in envelopes under the scorer's table. But let's stop pretending that the NBA is squeaky clean. It's orchestrated. It's kind of tainted because you know that those officials are going to put their thumb on the scale. They influence momentum. You're telling me Jalen Brunson just so happened to pick up 5 fouls in a 9-minute span of a third quarter in a game the Celtics had to have to extend the series to 6 games. Really. And this happens the NBA is notorious for it. The only reason that Tim Donaghy's scandal was not bigger is because I don't know that many people were shocked at what happened. Other leagues have bad officials. the NBA has Scott Forster, who is known as the extender. And the media that covers the NBA more times feels like an extension of the league rather than someone who is actively investigating or criticizing it. But that's enough about the Knicks. On to our headline for today. And the headline is, the Pete Rose Hall of Fame debate did not die with Pete Rose. Look, when it comes to sports talk radio debates, none has stood the test of time quite like Pete Rose and the Baseball Hall of Fame. If you had to put together the Mount Rushmore of sports talk radio debates, Pete Rose Hall of Fame is 1, MJ LeBron is 2, Mount Rushmore debates themselves are probably number 3, and I guess maybe number 4 is PEDs or Tiger Woods, whatever. It's a distant fourth, I can tell you that. Pete Rose would be number 1 because that debate is as old as sports talk radio itself. So, of course, just when you think, hey, the debate is finally over, right? Pete Rose is now dead. Major League Baseball says, no. Just as soon as you think you're out, we're going to pull you back in. So here we go. Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, the 1919 Black Sox, as you probably know by now, all officially back in play, sort of. The baseball commissioner, Rob Manfred, removed them all from the permanently ineligible list. Over 100 years later, the ghost of the biggest scandal in baseball history, really probably in all of sports history, are technically eligible for the Hall of Fame. And of course, Pete Rose is too. So before we get ahead of ourselves, they're not getting inducted tomorrow. There's still a process because of the Hall of Fame procedures. Rose, Jackson, they won't even be eligible until December of 2027 when the Classic Era Baseball Committee meets again. That committee that's the old Veterans Committee guys who made the biggest impact before 1980. So we're not talking about the Baseball Writers of America. This is a smaller group. They only meet once every few years. And generally, they get their buddies and cronies into the Hall of Fame through the back door. So in terms of the Rose story, let's start at the beginning and work our way through this. The only thing, and this is the most important part, the only thing that kept Pete Rose out of the Baseball Hall of Fame all these decades was a guy by the name of Pete Rose. Pete Rose himself kept him out of the Baseball Hall of Fame. As great as he was at baseball, he was even better. He was even more elite at hurting his own case for the Baseball Hall of Fame. If there was a Hall of Fame of self-sabotage, Pete would unanimously get in, first ballot. They might build him his own wing. Pete Rose is the architect of his own demise and both the hero and villain of his story. For all the big Pete Rose fans, and there certainly are a ton of them that want to see him in the Hall or felt like he should have been in even while he was still alive, let's get a few things clear right off the bat. Pete Rose is the reason Pete Rose did not make the Baseball Hall of Fame. And it also should be pointed out, the Baseball Hall of Fame, it's the only one that matters. It's the only one where we have these debates of guys being in or not in. Not that the other Halls of Fame are not fine, but in terms of sports fans, the only ones that really spur debate is baseball. The amount of time spent debating the Baseball Hall of Fame is larger than debating all the other Hall of Fames combined. And that's largely because baseball, for most of its history, has been a small hall. It's been very exclusive. And that's a credit to the baseball writers. Unfortunately, there have been other pathways to the hall, as we mentioned with the Veterans Committee, and those have largely been a disaster. But other halls of fame like basketball, they simply treat it as a museum. The Baseball Hall of Fame does have a museum. They have artifacts and parts of history that are not related to guys who are in the Hall of Fame. But the Baseball Hall of Fame has stood out because it is so exclusive. Now, baseball has been kind of shifting a little bit more towards being a more big Hall of Fame. A big Hall of Fame fan believes that the Hall of Fame should be, well, bigger, maybe not wide open. Not everyone with a solid career gets in, but more inclusive of the game's greats who might not be the absolute elite. So people you're talking about here might be Don Mattingly or Keith Hernandez here in New York, or Kenny Lofton or Dave Stieb, or maybe David Cohn. That would be a big hall. More of a museum rather than the exclusive elite of the game where only 1% get in. I tend to be more of the small hall crowd. I'm more for the version of Cooperstown that is just for baseball gods that you don't even have to think about it. You know for sure that guy's. For me, if you have to debate it too long, that's a no. So it's Ruth, it's Mays, it's Mantle, it's Pujols, it's DiMaggio, whoever. But you know the names as soon as you hear them. It should be about recognizing the untouchable elite and keeping the Hall of Fame special for the reason why it was made special in the first place. So even now, the Baseball Hall of Fame matters than all the others. So now let's get back to Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose. If you're one of the people that hears Pete Rose's name and simply states, well, he should be in the Hall of Fame, he should have been in already, the only takeaway I can have from that statement is you believe that the rules do not apply, that there are no rules. If you get to a certain level, if you produce at a certain level in whatever sport or whatever job you have, that if you reach that level, there are no rules for you. You are too big for the rules, because that really is what the Pete Rose debate gets into. It's not whether his numbers are worthy. Clearly, that's not even debatable. Obviously, his numbers are worthy. There has never been a debate anywhere about his numbers, even on sports talk radio, where the debates get dumb and not all the callers are golden. This is simply about whether or not, if you're great, and if you are, you don't have to follow any rules, because there was one rule everyone everywhere knew you cannot break, especially Pete Rose. From the minute anyone walks into a baseball clubhouse since 1920, MLB Rule 21 is right there. It's on a wall. It's bolted to a door. It is hung like a warning sign to everyone who sees it. And it says, if you bet on baseball, you are done, period. Not suspended, not fined. You're done. You're out forever. So think about Pete Rose. He saw that sign every day of his professional life. Dude played 24 years. Only 5 guys in the history of baseball have played in more seasons. Nobody in the history of baseball has appeared in more games. And then he was a manager as well. He played in the minors for a few years. So he saw that sign thousands and thousands of times. You could make a reasonable argument. Nobody, in terms of players or management, has ever seen that sign more often than Pete Rose. And what did he do? He didn't just ignore it. He spit in its face. He bet on baseball as a manager. He bet on games he had a direct influence in. And when he got caught, what did he do? He lied about it. For 15 years, lied to everyone, to the media, to fans, to teammates, friends, everybody who came in contact with him. He lied to them. Then, of course, as it was time to sell a book, suddenly, oh yeah, I bet on baseball. How convenient. If getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame were his number one mission in life, admitting to it at any point before the book would have helped his case. Instead, that's not what he did. And he finally admitted he bet on baseball, but only as the Reds manager, right? You would have to be the most gullible person on earth to think that a gambling degenerate like Pete Rose only bet on the Reds, and only when he got to be a manager. There's plenty of evidence that he bet as a player, and that would just make sense. Of course there was. He didn't get to be a manager and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I might start betting on baseball. It would defy logic to think anything else. And while there's been no evidence presented of him betting against his team, would you bet on that? I know I wouldn't. So this was not some simple oversight. He did this all this time for years. The one rule, the one thing you can't do, he did every day, basically for years, as a player, as a manager. So if you just want to throw that out, you're basically saying, well, there are no rules. The whole point of rules is they apply when it's hard, not just when it's easy. And they should apply to everyone. So there's no debate. Pete Rose bet on baseball, knew what he was doing, and did it anyway. He didn't care. So then the second point everybody brings up, the pro Pete Rose crowd. Well, hasn't the man suffered enough? Well, actually, no. It's the one rule that you cannot break. And also no, because never forget, Pete Rose agreed to a lifetime ban. He signed off on it. This is not something that Bart Giamatti just came up with on his own. Pete signed off on it once he saw the evidence that baseball had against him. And I get it, feels a little old school, a little fire and brimstone, especially now with how every league is in bed with every sports book. You can bet at the ballpark, the broadcasts have live betting odds between pitches. I get the hypocrisy, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but none of that changes the original point of Rule 21. It's not a suggestion. It's not a memo. It's a law, and not just a law, the law of the land in Major League. It's the one rule that absolutely cannot be blurred. The whole point of the rules are that they apply when they're hard, not just when they're easy. They don't just apply to the regular folk, they apply to everybody. And Pete Rose knew that and decided to break it anyway. And he actually got the benefit of being Pete Rose. Being a star like Pete Rose, you get a chance to fix what you had broken. And he got multiple chances to fix it, to take any step in the direction of actually just doing the right thing. And time again, he refused. From 1989 until the moment he died. If he wanted to repair that situation, he absolutely could have, but it would have actually required him to do something that maybe he didn't want to do. He had nothing but opportunities, and really, no sport loves the history of the game more than baseball. They were willing to give him a second chance, but he didn't give that second chance a second look. You can go back to the early 2000s. Commissioner Bud Selig gave Rose a path back to the game. The door was open. All Rose had to do was come clean. Just tell the truth. Stop with all the lies. Stop with all the casino appearances. Cut ties with people in the gambling world. Nothing too major. And how did he handle that? He ignored it. That was a lifeline. That was a second chance. Probably was way more than a second chance, but that was a second chance, and he fumbled it. Another self-inflicted wound in a career full of them. And this guy could have had the redemption arc of all redemption arcs. Again, what sport loves its history more than baseball does? He could have walked into Cooperstown, but Pete, being Pete, just couldn't get out of his own way. It's kind of hard to have that much sympathy for a guy who was the biggest impediment to his own success. And then, of course, he comes clean in a book in 2004. That's when he finally admits to betting on baseball as a manager. But of course, even that confession came with asterisks. Oh, I only bet on the Reds to win. Like, that makes it okay. It's amazing. Even Pete, as a known gambler, still hedging his bets, still trying to manage the optics. He was a phenomenal player, and nobody can touch that. But let's be honest, this dude was a grifter. He was a con man. And just like a die-hard degenerate gambler, he was always trying to find that edge. And then years later, ESPN came out with that report about he bet as a player too, which, yes, obviously. It wasn't like he just woke up one day as Reds manager and said, you know what, I love betting other sports. Why don't I bet on the sport that I'm most associated with and have the most knowledge about? And when that report came out, what did he do? He clammed up, wouldn't admit it, wouldn't own it, even with the receipts stacked a mile high. And that was the pattern with Pete Rose. He got chance after chance after chance. He got lifeline after lifeline after lifeline. And every time he found a way not just to fumble them, he would torpedo them. And not because the world was out to get him like he'd like to portray, but because Pete Rose was always Pete Rose's biggest problem. And the Pete Rose fans will bring up other things too, the steroid guys, as if that has anything to do with it. Totally different conversation. Bonds and Clemens and A-Rod, McGuire, and so those guys tainted the record books. And guess what? They're not in the Hall of Fame either. The writers have held the line on that for the most part. I'm sure a few guys have snuck in there. Ivan Rodriguez is in there. But Pete Rose, his case is unique because he violated the one unbreakable commandment in baseball: don't bet on the game. And he did it with the full knowledge of the consequences. So Pete Rose, no, he should not be in the Hall of Fame before. He should not be there now. He should not be there ever, because Rule 21 isn't just something you hang on a wall. It's there to remind every young player coming up that there are still lines you don't cross. And maybe that is more important now than ever before, with the game swimming in betting partnership and gambling promos. And think about even now, if Pete Rose, now, even that he's gone, gets into Cooperstown, what we're telling future generations. Yeah, the rule matters, but if you're really good and you're really famous, even if you don't do a single thing to fix what you broke, we'll fix it for you, even if you're belligerent on it till the end. So to me, it makes perfect sense for Pete Rose, one of the biggest names in the sport, to be one of the biggest warning signs in the sport as well. You bought the ticket, you took the ride, and the ride ended exactly where it would have to end, with you not in Cooperstown as a result. As the kids say, mess around and find out. Pete Rose messed around and found out. Now, if Rose eventually does get in, and I would think with this move, he eventually will. I think I mentioned this in the Barry Bonds episode. The Baseball Hall of Fame is 8 hours round trip from my house. Every baseball fan, I will say this, should absolutely go to the Baseball Hall of Fame and see it firsthand. It is fantastic. It's amazing. It's incredible. You will love it. You should absolutely see it once. Once is enough. Once is more than enough to go see the baseball hall. You can do it in a road trip. It does not have to be a yearly thing. So Pete does eventually get in. I won't be yelling and screaming because I know he is a Hall of Fame player, but that doesn't mean with his history, you should have thrown him a day to honor him, considering the things that he did. And I'm not even taking into account all the other things after his playing career that got brought up. I am simply pointing out this one rule. It's the only rule you have to follow, and if you don't follow that one, it doesn't matter. As for baseball and Rob Manfred's part in this, I think it's a major mistake to remove Rose from the list just because he's not with us anymore. I think it's even worse for the Black Sox team from 1919. To me, that one's outrageous. They threw a World Series. For all the sympathy about Shoeless Joe Jackson, he did admit to accepting money. And it just comes off as extremely hypocritical of Major League Baseball. They still want the day to celebrate the player, but they feel okay about it now because the player's not here to accept the honor. I guess for Rob Manfred, at least he considers this now off his plate. And it's kind of fitting. The Black Sox scandal brought about the first baseball commissioner. And with Rob Manfred's call on this and on Pete Rose, it now turns out baseball's definition of integrity has an expiration date. Who knew? All right, so that's the final word on Pete Rose, at least for now. I'm sure something will come up that'll bring the topic back to the forefront, at least until we do an episode on how he was kind of overrated as a player, but that should be a hoot down the road somewhere. Right now, let's move on to the NFL. The league announced its schedules this week, which would not ordinarily seem like a big deal. It sounds even weird saying, hey, the NFL released the schedules, but it is a big deal because everything for NFL fans that is NFL related is a big deal. The NFL does not just compete with other leagues, it competes with holidays, and the NFL wins. They're undefeated against Thanksgiving and Christmas. They are running laps around everyone else. So the schedule release came a day or two after the NBA draft lottery, so some talking heads, I saw Mike Greenberg talking about it mostly, that the NFL would benefit from having a draft lottery. It's not the first time the idea has been brought up, but of course, much like the NBA media rushing to protect the league, a bunch of NFL media people hopped on their Twitters. The NFL doesn't need that. Why would the NFL want to be more like the NBA? This is a solution to a problem the NFL doesn't have. Well, look, you can like the idea, you can hate the idea, but let's not pretend that fans would not absolutely eat it up. And I think that was Greenberg's main point. The NFL could put that on pay-per-view and fans would absolutely watch. That would be far more compelling TV than a lot of things that the NFL has going on. The league has millions of people watching the draft for days. People eat up draft grades immediately after the draft. Fans love reading mock drafts months, sometimes years ahead of time. There are mock drafts somewhere right now on the internet for 2026, and people are absolutely absorbing them. Is there anything dumber than power rankings in the NFL week after week? The release of the schedule, mind you, teams' opponents were already decided as soon as the previous year ended. You knew exactly who you were going to play next year. So all the schedule release was the when. When are you going to play those other teams? So are we to now believe that if the NFL did compose a draft lottery, it would turn fans off? That is impossible. The NFL now is bulletproof. There is no single decision. I wonder if there's even a series of decisions that can get fans as a whole to quit watching. And not just the games, anything related to the NFL. A couple of years ago, the big CTE study was supposed to be the iceberg. Instead, the NFL clearly just built a bigger ship and bounced off that iceberg like Derrick Henry. And right now, the NFL is making plenty of decisions that should turn fans off, but won't. Let's start with the streaming services that you need to watch every NFL game. This upcoming season, I'm pretty sure you'd need to have YouTube TV, Amazon Prime, ESPN Plus, Peacock, potentially NFL Plus, also Netflix to watch all of the different games. It used to be just Sunday games and a Monday night game. Now it's Sunday games, Monday games, Thursday games, Black Friday games, Christmas games, Thanksgiving games. Hey, how about we go for a cash grab and play games in foreign countries? Brazil, Ireland, England, Spain, Germany. How about all the cash grab games taking place in foreign countries that are happening at God knows what time here? The NFL always presents these games as if they're doing this for you when they're really doing it to you. This is not to your benefit, it's to theirs. Never mind the in-stadium experience with PSLs or different weather in the Northeast or traffic, the time commitment that you have to make to attend an NFL game. It's all day. And plus, watching an NFL game is like watching a TV show be filmed. It's kind of cool to see it one time, but it's not the optimal experience. The NFL is our national religion, so the idea that a draft lottery is not needed or somehow it would turn off fans is ridiculous. And I'll tell you right now, if the NFL can figure out the way to maximize making a buck or two out of it, that's all that matters. You realize with these leagues, they're not teams, they're not franchises, they're businesses. And anything they can do to grow the financial pie, they'll do. But back to the lottery conversation in the NFL. I think it's an interesting one and really one that it's only a matter of time. The NFL does not need a lottery yet because lotteries are generally to prevent tanking, and tanking has not really been an issue, at least not so far. But make no mistake, it's going to eventually hit. Browns tried it a few years ago. The Dolphins tried it a couple of years ago. Both botched it because they got the quarterback position wrong. But just because the execution was flawed does not mean the blueprint is. Because it could absolutely work if you have someone who knows what they're doing and willing to sacrifice a couple of years. And in the NFL, why not sacrifice a couple of years? Because you're not going to lose any money as the owner. And this doesn't get brought up enough. The NFL does have a couple of major advantages to tanking. One, it's easier to actually pull it off. The main thing you have to have in the NFL is just a really bad quarterback who would not have a starting job anywhere else. I'm telling you right now, if you started Tim Boyle as your quarterback to start the year, you're getting the number one pick. The other major benefit in the NFL in tanking is there is no lottery. So if you get the first pick and you hit on that draft pick, especially at one of the high value positions of quarterback, left tackle, pass rusher, or shutdown corner, you're probably going to have that player in their most valuable seasons, really for the most valuable parts of their career. A 5-year rookie deal and the franchise tag maybe once or twice. Draft picks in the NFL, because there are more of them, are more valuable. And you can stockpile picks in a way that's harder to do in the other sports. Make no mistake, tanking is going to creep into the NFL at some point. It's only a matter of time before it plants its flag, and only a matter of time before someone does it right, and then everyone else says, hey, we should be doing that too. So when it does hit the league will wrap it in primetime lights and call it maybe something different than a draft lottery, and the public will absolutely eat it up like it's Super Bowl Sunday. Because it's the NFL, and everything they touch turns to gold. All right, let's get to 3 and out. We'll start things off with, first up, Juan Soto makes his much-awaited return to the Bronx tonight. First game of the Subway Series, the Mets traveling to face the Yankees. Soto, of course, the big story in the offseason, leaving the Yankees to sign with the Mets. That never happened. Somebody leaves the Yankees to go to the Mets. Well, 15 years and $765 million will do that. And at least so far, this season, Soto has been good, but he has not been prime Juan Soto. And when you sign a guy for $765 million, you want the best version of that player, and that has not been the case so far. Now, that happens all the time. Francisco Lindor was not prime Francisco Lindor for at least the first year of his contract with the Mets, and he's making half the money of Soto. But all the talk has been that Soto's not happy with the Mets. He's made this mistake. It kind of feels like desperate Yankee fans reaching for something. 2 things I'll say. 1, Soto is going to hit a home run Friday night. I don't even know who's pitching tonight, but book it. Juan Soto is going deep and is going to silence Yankee Stadium. The other part of this is Yankee fan reaction. A lot of talk about how they're going to react. Are they going to boo him? Are they going to curse him? Are they going to stay silent? Here's the thing. You really should give him a round of applause. He was fantastic in his one season at the Bronx. He left because he wanted something different. And you don't get to say you don't care about him while also screaming F Soto. Do you care or not? If you care, admit it and say it pains you that somebody left you and went to the other team in town. But if you really don't care, don't act like you do. And booing and cursing just shows that deep down, you're hurt. Also, this idea that Juan Soto is going to be impacted by Yankee fans booing him or cursing him or whatever. Guys, you are way overvaluing your presence. Juan Soto is one of the premier hitters in baseball. He's been around the block a time or two, and I find it hard to believe he's going to be walking to the plate with his knees knocking because bad Yankee fans are saying mean things to him. Get a grip. Juan Soto is sensational. He was sensational for the Yankees, and it's okay that he left and went someplace else. At some point, the Mets are probably going to regret the contract they gave him. If it turns out they've won a World Series or two before then, well, the deal was worth it. But if the Yankees had brought back Juan Soto, the team would be different and certainly not as complete. I can say one thing for sure. If the Yankees re-signed Juan Soto, they would not have signed Max Fried. And he has been essential in that starting rotation, especially with the injury to Garrett Cole. All right, number 2, the New York Giants have a difficult schedule and a brutal start to 2025. So Giant fans all ticked off because they opened the season with back-to-back road division games, Commanders, Cowboys, and then when they finally have their home opener, it's Sunday night against the Kansas City Chiefs. One, what do you expect, Giant fans? Look, you have a certain amount of opponents you have to play. How would you like to draw up the schedule so it won't be so bad? You don't play the Eagles in the first 3 weeks of the year. The Chiefs game, okay, that's a tough opponent, but at least it's at home and it's early in the season. I would always rather face perennial good teams earlier in the season than late. Late in the season, they're probably going to figure out what their problems were if they had any to begin with. I would rather face the Chiefs in September than December. And really, the bigger point here is that when you're the Giants and you've had like 2 winning seasons in the last dozen years, the biggest problem is that you don't get to face off against teams like the Giants. You're the Giants. Now, every year we look at the schedule and we think we know what teams are going to be good and what teams are going to be bad, and we don't. The NFL is completely unpredictable from week to week, and never is that more clear than thinking in May you know what teams will be good or not based on the schedule you have. All right, then finally, May 13th, 2025 will go down as one of the more impactful dates in recent NBA history from the draft lottery, which was, come on, how can you not think that that thing was rigged? Cooper Flag goes to Dallas. They had a 1.8% chance after they just so happened to trade their superstar to the Lakers for pennies on the dollar. It's so outlandish that it feels like the actual conspiracy is that that result was on the level. And the fact that that happened on the same night as the Jason Tatum injury to his Achilles, that injury just completely throws the Celtics' plans up in the air. No Tatum for next year. I've heard, well, he might be able to be back in time for the playoffs. You're going to force a guy coming off an Achilles injury who you have that much money invested in, and you're going to push him out there in the playoffs and expect results? Absolutely not. You have to prepare as if you are not going to have him at all next year. You cannot force him back for the postseason. But the Celtics payroll with the new owners, all of that, it's wild. Teams and organizations make all these plans, and the Celtics, one of the best in the NBA, and for that to happen, they now have to completely scrap their plan and start over. And the Tatum injury didn't just shake up the Celtics' blueprint, it completely blew it to pieces. And now the ripple effect is kind of hitting the entire Eastern Conference. The door to the finals this year, and you would have to say next year, has swung wide open. Maybe the Bucks end up holding on to Giannis as a result of that. Suddenly, every team in the East has to kind of rethink their strategy. Unless you were already tanking and not preparing to be a playoff team at all. What happened with Boston has to leave some teams sensing opportunity where there wasn't one before. So for all the talk about Giannis going here or Giannis going there, if he does get traded, that impacts 2 teams. The Tatum injury has a far wider impact because it impacts every team basically in the Eastern Conference. All right, people, that's going to do it for this episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Now, if you did not already, please subscribe. I'm begging you, whichever platform you're listening on, I'm not too proud to beg. Please like the episode, rate it, comment, whatever you can do. You can find me also on Substack, GordonDamerOnSports.substack.com. You can find me on Twitter @GordonDamer, and you can find me right back here on Monday with hopefully a Knicks victorious edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Until then, see ya.